All right. Well, with that sort of introduction, I mean, that is raising the bar really high about everyone. But it's good to see, everyone here. Good to see familiar faces, and it's good to have the opportunity to present. I've been eager to share as I've been like practicing, learning a whole lot, getting a lot of different perspectives. And I decided I should reach out to Yuri, say like, hey, is there a spot that I could present for the full stack developer meetup group? And it's like, yes, yes, come present. It's like, okay, great. I want to come in and candidly share because it's always good to have other people's perspectives who are going through different experiences. And I thought my perspective could be useful because in my former role, I was a chief architect in a very large enterprise. And now I'm basically starting something. So I'm developer one. And the difference between the two is quite vast, but there's a lot of interesting learnings that could be had. Like, what is the thing that really stands out about software development? So I thought I'd come and speak a little bit about that. And it will be, from some process and culture perspectives to tech. So at any point, if you want to ask further questions, we can get into it. But hopefully you find it interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So the title is Prioritize Product Development Speed. Now, maybe I should have put AI at the end of it, and you would have had like 60 more people attend this presentation. But I just thought I'd be more true to the point that this is just about going faster. Key part is prioritizing speed. And this talk, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is something that I want to share, something that maybe myself would wanted to have seen or heard earlier in my career that helps serve as a better way to think about software development. What's important? What should I be considering? What's going to work, whether it's small or big? What's the key elements of it? And what I'm focusing on right now, going from, being responsible for architecture that many developers are working on to something that I can work on, which allows me a lot of technical freedom, but also a lot of learning. I've been trying to focus on how to accelerate that learning. How can you create something that makes it clear what should be learned and how can you learn it faster? And how can you base this on the latest principles of behavioral science? How can behavior be shaped so you can have more excellent software developers quickly? Now, when you go to that developer one, you really see what matters in software development and more importantly, business development. You're no longer solving for one part, right? You're not having one particular role within the company. You are solving for every aspect of the company. So what you're building, you're thinking about the marketability, the adoption, the use case, the temp. You think a lot about everything. But one thing really stands out, and that's speed, right? How quickly can you build? So I'm not talking about latency. I'm not talking about how quickly can you code. I'm not talking about how quickly the tickets on your boards are closing. I'm talking about product development speed. Now, this isn't a term that's used in the industry, so let me define it for us to have something to go off of. So I would say it's the time it takes for an idea to get to customer value. Now, we've probably heard these, the idea stream, cycle time, lead time, but really when you start something and you're really responsible for propelling the business, you realize the importance from the very beginning, when it's just a rough idea in someone's mind, to how to get it to be value for someone is more key. Because a lot of times we get stuck in the realm of like, oh, our cycle time is good, our lead time is good. But if it took you like 30 days to figure out the idea to work on, it's not very good. Or maybe you shipped it to production, but no one's using it. So again, it's not very good. So when you are much smaller, you realize the importance of this is a thing that needs to be optimized. And whether you're big or small, it's going to be valuable. It's not something that it's like, oh, big companies do this or small companies do this. You need to think about how quickly you can get an idea to the end. And you start thinking very differently about software development when you have that full perspective in mind. So, let's ask a few simple questions. If it takes you 90 days to agree on what to be built, even though it takes 1 day to build it, what's your product development speed? 91 days. So you shouldn't be proud that it took you 1 day to develop. You're 91 days slow in terms of taking an idea to value. If it takes 1 day to create the work, whether it's in linear, Jira, but 30 days to start that work and then 1 day to develop is 32 days. If it takes 1 day to agree on an idea, but 30 days to figure out how to work within the CEO's OKR, smart process, QBRs, all these things, plus 1 day to develop, it's 32 days. It doesn't matter. You can't hide from it. This is the end-to-end part that matters. And even at the micro level, I'm sure you have heard people say, oh, this is super quick to code. Oh, it'd be really easy. And it's true. It takes 10 minutes to code it. But if it takes you 4 days to deploy it, it's a 4-day process. If it takes 10 minutes to code it, but 3 days to release it, it's a 3-day process. So, that's the thing you need to be thinking about. And what happens is when you are going slow, you start having bad adaptations and symptoms. You start hearing something like this. Is it done? Because people are trying to solve and understand the end-to-end point. Is it fully done, or are you saying a segment of it is done? And this isn't a good thing. You are fooling yourself. You got to think end to end. What matters? Like, what are we fully done? Are we able to take that idea all the way to the value? So when you think of it this way, it's like, well, some of this might sound a little bit intuitive, but why does it matter, right? And there are some reasons that are simpler to understand. The CEO wants it yesterday. And that pressure, when you're a developer in a large organization, you kind of don't get it. It's like, why is this pressure? Why do we have to keep going so fast? But I assure you, if you create a startup, you would understand why speed is so important, because you are caring for the revenue aspect, which really connects to everyone's position. So the CEO is doing something good and cares to say, we need it sooner. There's value in having it sooner. But also something we don't see as software engineers, but we're not feeling the full business element of it, is that it's competitive. So think about an idea you want to create. Very quick, since you're smart, you'll start asking, well, what are others doing in my industry? And then you get a few names, and then you start following them. And then you start seeing them build really interesting features. And you start thinking, oh, I'm falling behind. I got to go faster. So business is competitive, but when you get exposed to the full competition, you realize how important it is to go fast. The speed is very key to success. Otherwise, you will fall behind. And then the third part is that speed is engaging. One thing before starting a startup is you will hear a lot about how it's important to launch quickly. Launch quickly to get feedback so that the thing you're creating is good or not, right? Makes sense, because it's all about experimentation. I'm sure you've heard about lean startup. You got these ideas that you got to release fast, but you question yourself saying, well, maybe I just want to make something better. I want to take a little longer. But really, you come to realize, no, there's a secondary reason behind that advice. Because if you're working on something for an extended period of time and it hasn't gotten released, you haven't seen someone get value out of it, you are not getting a dopamine hit to keep you going. You can't be engaged. And I'm sure you feel it yourself, whatever organization you're in or team you're in, if you're working on something for an extended period of time and you're just getting disengaged, it starts going past 6 months, you're not seeing the customer value, you're not getting that feedback, it starts being really hard to be engaged at work. So these business reasons are really valid and really key to keep in mind. If you can't go fast, then you're going to have business level problems. But there are also technical aspects to it that, once I started to realize how I could code stuff and how to think about planning, I realized how inversely correlated your speed to planning is. And if I had to put it in a visual, it would look like this. If you can code really quickly, if you can get an idea out to production and customer value very quickly, then you don't have a big need to plan a whole lot, right? Because you get a rough idea, you try it out, maybe it's not good, you change it up, you code it up again, and you try it out, and you see how it goes. The planning time doesn't need to be so high. But if you are not paying attention and it gets slower, so it's no longer 1 day, but 3 weeks, now it's more reasonable for people to want to plan because you don't have so many options to reiterate, to retry. And at some point, you hit a critical mass where someone within the business will say, okay, everyone, we need to, quote unquote, grow up and have processes so that we can make sure we hit the mark. And of course, if business leaders are very influential, they start saying, sales and marketing can hit their mark, why can't engineering be more predictable in their deliveries? And suddenly you'll see this big spike in how much time is being spent in planning and how little time now you get for coding. And if you keep in mind how important speed is, you won't hit that mark. The faster you can go, the faster you can actually, get, the more time you get to code, the more engaged you can be. But the second technical reason is that when you are putting speed at one of the highest priorities, you don't get caught up in best practices, but rather you actually get a lot of practical practices because you're thinking a lot about what is the ROI of what I'm doing? What is the business value of what I'm doing? You're not thinking about, oh, someone said this in a lecture, someone said this in a speaker note. That's the best practice. And that really is distracting. If you want to be the best, you need to think more about ROI. So let me, make it more engaging, not just me one way speaking. Let's play a game. Small set of questions that I'm going to ask. Okay, so in the Accelerate book, I'm sure many people have heard of it. It's where the DORA metrics emerge. The deployment frequency, the change failure rates, the mean time to recovery. That's where these 4 metrics came from. Now, the companies that were studied here, if they had better DORA metrics, they were higher performing organizations. The question I have for you, was it smaller or bigger companies that tended to have better DORA metrics? You could say smaller companies have less baggage, so they can go quickly. Bigger companies have more resources, so they can take the team topology book and say like, oh, let's create a stream team here and that team there, and we could go so quickly. Which one do you think actually had better DORA metrics? Now, I'm just going to find my chat just so I can pause and make it. Or if anyone wants to say it out loud, because I think, I don't know how many people are here.
Smaller companies.
Yeah, small team. So yeah. Okay. Okay, people are saying smaller. Okay. Everyone thinks smaller. Well, trick question. It has no statistical significance what size you are. That's not the thing that makes you fast or slow. It's really easy to create a story in your mind, a reason for why things are slow to justify it. But it's more about how you do things yourself. You need to stop comparing to artificial things on the outside. There is no statistical significance. Let's ask a different question. Now, you might start seeing some of my personal opinions, but which testing distribution has a better return of investment? Well, I mean, it's left and right.
Left and right.
I'll wait a little bit for you to think about it. Okay. Well, I can. Oh, who needs to test? Just ship it. Oh, that's funny. Like that is even more true at the very early stage of the startup. It's like, why am I testing? There's no one even here. What am I protecting against? So here's the thing. I'm sure all of us have seen the left one. I mean, we all have heard the term testing pyramid, and the logic behind it makes sense. The lower you are on the stack, the faster all these tests can be run. Further, you can test far more permutations, so there'll be more unit tests. And as you go up, the pieces connect, so it gets slower, so you don't want as many, therefore it gets less. And as you go to the top, it gets even slower, so you'll have less, and it's also harder to do different permutations. That's what we're taught. And when you're thinking about best practices, that's an easy thing to keep telling everyone, like, look, we got to get the testing pyramid. Where's our unit test? What's going on? But when you're thinking about product development speed, and I'm quite confident in saying, if you were to create a company, you would very quickly realize, wow, that will take a lot of time, which we do not have, whereas we could get most of the value from the right side, especially in the JavaScript ecosystem. The unit tests and integration tests, in a lot of cases, they are not so far apart in speed. Yet the integration test will cover a lot of the key cases you want. So you say, okay, well, I'm just going to then prioritize the integration test. Then you say, I'm going to add some typing and linting, and that gives me a big static amount of testing, which is very cheap. And then everything else, you think more, do I need it? Like, this is my security portion. So I will do unit testing in this case. End to end, I'll cover some key workflows, but you don't artificially think about best practices. You're thinking practically about what's going to help our business and what do we really need to feel safe so we can keep going faster. So in my opinion, a lot of people over time, they realize the right side is better. The visual that someone created, it's called the trophy test hierarchy. So it looks like they made a better one, but it's essentially you can hold it up like a trophy. Now I'll ask a different question. Again, this is thinking about end to end. Which would you pick for building your app UI? Now, I know I'm thinking a lot about web application development, and some of these might imply certain frameworks, but what would you want to pick? Now, some of these I'm not sure how many people know and how much front end experience people have. But I'll provide some context. One that doesn't cause me to hire a front end. Yeah, that is business thinking right there. So the left side, let's talk about it. Tan stack table, very good table framework, right? And with Tailwind, you can create exactly the sort of visuals you want. It's a very powerful framework and library. And a lot of times nowadays, it's getting popular to think about having headless UI components so you can go and style it exactly as you want. And if you combine this, it's free. So you're thinking, wow, great, this is best of breed. I'm gonna have the best thing that I can have and create exactly the brand visual characteristic that I want. But when you are thinking about product development speed, and especially if you're in B2B, where in my experience, what I'm working on, as soon as I show, like, people don't want to be in the software. They're trying to do their work and get out. This is not an entertainment software. So it's more about practicality. And when you're thinking about how can I get stuff faster to the customer so they can get more value faster, so I can meet their needs faster, you realize I don't want to have to learn 3 different things. Sure, it gets me better design, but MUI will just solve most of my problem and I can get on with the business problem that I'm solving. I have to pay $15 a month. Okay, that's so cheap compared to the value proposition. I will do that if required. So you start thinking differently because you have a speed element on you. You're thinking constantly about how fast can we go, right? And you start wanting to have less rather than more stuff in your stack. So it's not a definitive answer. Of course, I understand based on different contexts, maybe the left side, something particular, some marketing aspect you need it for, you might still go that. But when you're thinking about speed, it's not about just what is best and what gives you the most flexibility. Sometimes you actually want to constrain yourself and make it artificially simpler so that you can just go faster and think more about your business. Now, some of this is, you might start to agree. It's like, okay, it's important, but why is it hard? Why is it hard to have product development speed? Why is it so difficult to go fast and everyone just over time gets slower and slower? And I've been thinking a lot about it. And I think there's 2 particular reasons. I call them the unknown unknowns. And the second one, I call the culture mismatch. So when it comes to the unknown unknowns, to solve a customer problem, you need to understand fully how to solve the problem. You can't solve a customer problem with just I know UI, great. The customer has data. Where do you put it? So you need to understand fully how software works if you want to optimally solve the problem. And a lot of people only have a slice, and even that slice, they don't have mastery of it. So naturally, you have suboptimally solved problems. And this is a big problem in that your solution space is large. Your company tech stack, already has limited you. But if you have limited yourself, then you have a far less overlap with the ideal solution space. So you can't get the best solution for the customer. You don't know what the simplest way is to solve that problem. So, the problem, if I had to visually show it, there's all these artificial boundaries we are doing. Now, the good part is in this group, it's full stack. So you already know it's important, right? But I'm sure you hear people marketing themselves as, I'm a front-end developer, which I fully understand, right? Like sometimes it's just a resume aspect, a certain appeal. If you've done one thing for 10 years, that might make you really need it for a particular space. But if you're trying to solve problems, it becomes problematic when you only know one thing. So when someone says, I'm a front-end developer, They're confining themselves to such a small portion of the software. I'm a backend developer. You're very limited in your understanding. Data engineer, very limited. And my favorite is when it's not even like the title, but rather when someone introduces themselves as the thing. DevOps, which I like to go to such people and say, hi, DevOps, I'm Agile. Would you like to meet my friends Lean and Kanban here? It's like, wow, you really took your job seriously. It's your identity. It's kind of funny. Now, you take this perspective, people have limited perspective. You have Google uses X for, tool picking. That's your justification. There's a mindset of new must be better. And then you say, well, all the other developers are doing this, so I should be doing that. It's naturally going to get you to be the slow tortoise. You're going to be slow in product development speed. So what's a way for it to become more concrete? And this is where I thought, like, okay, let's get a bit more technical. Now, obviously, the more technical you get, the more people will disagree or the particulars will stand out. But I wanted to talk about Postgres because it's something I really related to as I went way, way deeper into it throughout my career. So Postgres is commonly used in a lot of different companies. I don't know within the audience's pool, if you are using it, mention it. It'd be nice to know how many people are using Postgres today. But one thing you'll find is a lot of people just think of Postgres as, oh, I just need this thing to hold my stuff. I don't really care too much about it. I just need something stateful. And this causes an interesting outcome. So we're going to take three personas, right? You have a developer with unknown unknowns. You have a second developer that knows about their unknowns. So they have some awareness of a space, but they don't know the depths of it. And then and then there's the developer that knows their stuff. So they have no knowns. Now you take these three personas and you put them in a problem-solving space. So CEO or someone from a product side is coming in and saying, I want search capability. I want the user to just search for everything within the software and see it on a list. If you have unknown unknowns, it's very natural to hear someone say, hey guys, I think we need Elasticsearch to do search here. I mean, it's in the name. It can't go wrong. It's what could go wrong here? And it sounds good, right? They would justify it, say, like all these big companies are using it. They're a big company, they're focused on this. And it's really easy to get caught in this. But it's also a really huge infrastructure jump. You're introducing an entirely new system into your tech stack. Now you also have to consider dual write. Now, it's not as bad with search sort of data, but it's a big change and that you're taking on. Now, someone who has known unknowns, they'll say like, I've heard Postgres has a lot of capabilities. I think you have something like search in it. Maybe let's go read into it. And then you have the person who knows how things work and says, why don't we just use Postgres' full text search? I mean, great way to get started, and we'll improve on it over time if required. The third point is the simplest and fastest way to get started. In fact, I'll just show you the code, right? If you want to have full text search, you go ahead and create a column with TS vector type. You then create an index on it, gen index, and then you just search for it using the double at operator, and it will work like any other query that you have. Now, am I saying it's equivalent to Elasticsearch? No, but will it meet probably a lot of your product requirements? Yes. And if you're successful, great, adjust. You want to figure out this incremental ways to get there. And this approach, which will definitely be what you want to do in a startup, is also what you can do within big companies to allow you to be agile and see, oh, this new segment actually, it worked for. Now let's bring in the Elasticsearch. Now we need more capacity and scale. That's how we need to think about it. But you can't get there if you don't even know this option exists. So you would just say, let's use Elasticsearch. Let's pick another example. Someone will say, I want a faster experience. Now, there are many ways to improve speed, but we'll kind of take the caching approach. So naturally, someone's going to say, hey, we need to cache with Redis. Everyone knows Redis, in-memory cache, super fast, microseconds. And also our applications in Ruby. So why don't we rewrite key parts of it, move it to Go, Rust, and, or Java. I don't know how many people would suggest Java necessarily, but they will be faster than Ruby. But the person who has unknowns will say like, okay, well, our databases are using increasingly NVMe. They're pretty good. And there's actually more data types in Postgres. What can we do today to make it work? And then you have someone, again, with knowns that have mastery over the work, and they'll say, why don't we try something simple and see if it alleviates a problem? Why don't we create unlocked tables and turn off synchronous commits to increase the write throughput and just see if this improves the experience? Which again, is much lighter work to do. So if you want to create a table that doesn't have write-ahead logs, you just say create unlocked table. And for the simplicity of this example, the key, you have a key, you have a value, but you can put whatever you want in and then insert it at time. And if you wanted to set up a very simple eviction policy, you set up a function that deletes from this cache based off that inserted at column, and you set up a cron to run every hour to make sure it's emptied out. You got the essence of it in place. And if this works and you're feeling like this is good, now you can move to something bigger and better once you need it. But don't immediately jump to those end cases. Again, adding Redis will make things harder. Like, just start simple. So, you want to know your unknowns. And once you have a good feel of these unknowns, then you want to pick the relevant ones to start mastering. You want to then have mastery over the tool set that your company is using for the problem space that you have. And there's a lot of capabilities people's existing tools have. So if I take that same Postgres example, if you want caching, I mentioned unlocked tables. If you want JSON storage, a lot of people, especially at the beginning, they pick tools like MongoDB or other document sort of storage because they just want to put in a JSON. Good, just use JSON-based data type then. You want to serve very fast APIs, use JSON-B aggregation capability. Do you want to set up a simple message queue? Use the skip locked querying capabilities. Are you creating a fun AI and you want to try stuff out? Well, rather than using Pinecone, just turn on PG Vector and try it out. And then post-GIS spatial search. Yuri has a question, but let me finish this point and I'll pause for you. And with analytics, there's a few interesting options out there. I'm monitoring AWS's zero ETL. It's pretty interesting because it just automatically takes your OLTP and puts it in Redshift as OLAP without any overhead. Or you could look into other extensions such as PG Analytics and see if that gets you going. If you want some basic PubSub, try notify and listen before you add something more complex. And again, it's all to get you going. And then if it's good, then you can evolve on it. But don't take giant steps. It really hurts your product development speed. And you might make a mistake. You might realize it's not actually the thing that moved the needle within the company, the thing that really mattered to the customers. Now I'll pause because you already had a question.
Yeah, like this is fantastic list that can you can replace a lot of different things by using Postgres. But I'm just curious, like we had chat a year and a half ago with you about this topic. And what do you think right now, like permissions, how Postgres can help solve permission problem? Because I'm pretty sure, like
Oh man. So if there was one thing I spent a lot of time trying to learn is the permission system, because a lot of people have problems with permissions. And okay, so I don't know how many people know, but Postgres has built-in role-level security capability. And for a lot of different startups, when someone's trying to build an idea, I give them a few tips. I'm like, dude, don't waste your time with all this permission stuff. Just turn on Postgres' thing and set up this role security policy. Will help you a lot. So, Yuri, to your question, I've been doing a lot of it, and you can get very far in it. So it's in my opinion, very good. If you use other solutions, I understand there are like Zanzibar, and even I monitor AWS's verified permissions capability. They're good, but if you want to go really fast, like you have to add the system, call those systems to get the permission set, to then convert it to SQL anyway, to then do the query. Like, it's a lot of work. And it's like, dude, if you want to go fast, keep it simple. And the closer you are to your data set, it's much faster all the time. Like you got to think a lot about when you're pulling data out of the database, you want to figure out how to pull as little as possible out if you want to be highly performant. So the fact that the database can do it and you can protect it at the source, it's much simpler to think about it from a security perspective and efficiency. So for other people's perspective, if you want permissions, look at Postgres's RLS capability. It's quite good. And also I'm happy to share and talk about it further afterwards.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah. So related to that, there's this blog post. It's kind of tongue in cheek. It's pretty funny, but it's titled "Just Use Everything for Postgres." At the beginning, it sounds silly, but if you actually kind of think about it, you realize, oh, it's not so crazy after all. Like you can achieve a lot. Like people get quite excited about, oh, with GraphQL, I can get exactly the query I need for my UI. And then, when you know more about the database, you realize, are you just talking about a view? Just create a view. It will give you exactly what you want in JSON format. Then go use it, and you can filter it and put limits and paginate and everything pretty easily. So you can do a lot. Now, I'm not saying you might end up using everything up within Postgres, but it can do far more than people even know that it can do today. And even in my personal experience, I advise local tech companies, which is pretty interesting because they get perspective on where people are struggling, how people think. And sometimes it's very simple stuff. Like it's amazing how many times you're in conversations where people are trying to convince you to have a very complicated problem and you're just missing an index. It's like you can tell they don't really know how to use the explain or turn on the auto explain or use the PG statement, or they don't have that. They're not using that sort of concocting complex solutions. Like, oh, we got to really do this thing. It's like, are you sure? Let's add this index. Oh, everything's fast. Okay, I'm done. I'll see you tomorrow. Just remember me when you have any challenges. The other one is like your dependency management solution. So a lot of people are very willy-nilly adding stuff to their package.json and not removing it. And it's like, oh, why is their CI getting slow? It's like, look into what you're putting in your application. It's one line, but actually it's hundreds of code, hundreds of lines of code that you're putting in, and that's going to have adverse impact. Or enabling tracing. When you have unknown unknowns, it sounds like someone saying something so complicated. Oh, we got to add tracing. It's so hard. And then when you add tracing, you're like, oh, I just added this package and I turned on this statement and I got tracing. But again, if you have unknown unknowns, I understand. It sounds so complicated. But if you have some understanding, you realize, no, it's not so bad. So master your existing tool sets before picking up new ones. And you'll realize that when you're focusing on speed, it actually naturally tailors you this way because you're trying to keep things simple. You don't get excited when new stuff get added because you're like, oh man, that's going to make us go slower. I want to be fast. It's engaging. And furthermore, when you're thinking about speed, you get a better perspective when you should persist versus rethink. There's a bit of a bad habit in my experience that people like to persist through problems rather than taking a moment and asking, why is it so hard? Am I maybe using the wrong thing? And you realize, yes, probably. You should be thinking about it a little differently. So maintain that beginner mindset. Don't think you are done. You will continue to learn and continue to realize, crap, I wish I knew more. Like I definitely know I can learn more about the front end right now, but I'm constantly trying to know more of my unknowns in that space. And you might think then, okay, well, how can I learn it? And here's some simple ways to consider, right? So the simple way I use personally is I just subscribe to weekly newsletters. So there's a Cooper Press newsletter. They curate different articles and blogs or news updates within different ecosystems. So Node ecosystem, Golang, Python, Rails, Postgres. Just read the titles, be aware of what's out there, be aware of what's happening, so that later on, when you hit a certain problem, you realize, okay, I'm just going to go to my mailbox and just see what that thing was. At this point, it'll be useful for me. Periodically code outside of your area. Sometimes people are so bogged down in their particular space or they identify too much with it that they forget to go outside. And when they go outside, they realize, oh, wait, I've been really limiting how I think about solving problems. I could have solved problems so much faster outside. But in a larger organization, ask for a learning roadmap from a senior. If you have a trusted senior, someone that is very good and credible, just ask them, like, what do you think would push me forward? Like with the tech stack and understanding of the business, what will help move us forward? And I think in the previous session, actually, Madeline mentioned this point, and I think others were saying the same thing in the comments. People were saying like, hey, mentoring is going to be a key aspect if people are going to take ownership of the services they have. But it's really hard also, for example, having been in this position, when you are on the operational side of services, for someone to take ownership, you need some trust element. Like, do you have the competency to take it, or are you going to blow it up more and it's going to come back? So you want to have some ways to pass it off and know people have a good understanding of it. And in that regard, that's where I get very interested. And I realize when you actually want to give people a roadmap and a way to assess them and accelerate them to go forward, you don't have an easy way to do it. I kept trying to do it, and I tried all these different spreadsheet solutions. It wasn't working. But what I always just wanted to get to was, can I say these are the Postgres skills I need to know that you have, and for your role in this organization? And then I want to know, has anyone assessed you on it? So do you actually know this or not? So that I could follow up and make sure people are succeeding, that within their role, they do have role mastery. Because I can tell you, when someone doesn't know something in a meeting, very few personalities are going to be like, oh, I don't know. Like, their ego will they'll just be quiet and they'll move on and they'll try to figure it out. But this is a better way to know, is anyone falling behind? Are people doing good? And a lot of times people themselves want to know, are they doing well or not? And then when you go into assessments, actually assess people and say like, hey, you don't have a good understanding of the following. This is where you're at now. Let's follow up in a month's time. Let's see if you understand it. So do you understand Postgres as types? And that can really make things simpler. Do you understand how to write performance SQL queries? Do you understand the different data constraints so that we can prevent bad data corruption? Like, these are important things, but if you don't have a roadmap, it's really hard to make sure everyone on the team is on the same page. So that's the space that I'm trying to solve, trying to make it easier. Now, the second part, I'm trying to see if anyone had anything there to say, but nothing. So we're good. The second part, I would say, is culture mismatch. Now, I mean, I don't know, maybe it comes across as I'm opinionated, but really sometimes I wonder, is there an incentive to go fast? Seriously, your compensation isn't tied to product development speed. You get the same salary regardless. Are you really judged for your speed, or on looking like you have a lot of speed? So, I personally really don't like RTO pushes, because it just means people are playing now with visibility and trying to be more in front of leadership rather than actually solving customer problems and how quickly they can address customer needs. And a lot of typical management tasks, it's really easy for it to get caught up in the ritual rather than the reason it emerged. So stand-ups, retros, one-on-ones, these stuff emerge to go fast. But when you lose the history, people are doing it, and then they justify that their time was taken up because they had to do it. You had a bad concoction culturally. So I'm going to just give two examples, and this was a personal experience that I had. You go to one martial arts school and they're focused on positivity, good social connections, and breaking a sweat. You go to another martial arts school and you're focused on winning tournaments and training for competition. Which school has better fighters? Like, I mean, I can't definitively say, but I'm quite confident if I had to place bets, it'd be the second one. And the second one, it's not like people are unhappy there. People are voluntarily paying to go there because they want to be better. It's not, sometimes people think tough places are unhappy places. No, people who want to be great want to be at places that are pushing them to be great. So let's take the software example. You go to one organization that's focused on being agile. Hey, we're lean, we're being DevOps. And then one just says, look, we're here to solve problems as quickly as possible. Which organization might have better product development speed? In my opinion, the one that just focuses on the thing and doesn't get caught up in the jargon. So tomorrow at work, have some fun and say like you went to this meetup and this person said for you to do this. But when you're having a stand-up tomorrow, ask, why are you having it? If your board can tell you the truth, is it getting you value? How much of your retrospective are you focusing on speed? Are you doing it because you always did it? And the items you take there, how many of them do you actually do? If you're not actioning on them, then why are you bothering? Your MRs, your PRs, how long are they taking to merge in? Why are they taking so long to merge in? Right? Why can't the team members get to it quickly? Why are they so busy? How come you can't do branch deployments? Why can't you just share your environment with PM and see what feedback they have for you immediately? And how come the team doesn't understand certain parts of the frame platform? Why don't they understand the data storage? Why don't they understand different pieces? These are the questions that start focusing you on speed. So feel free to, push push management, push the team to get better. Let the product development speed be the North Star. Whenever things go slow, something is wrong. And when you start thinking this way, you don't get caught up in questions like, oh, should I use Svelte, Vue, or React? It's like, who cares? Which one can be used to build UI quickly? And don't get me wrong, I get it. Like personally, at a technical level, I think Svelte is way more interesting than the other two. But I also know if I just want to solve the customer problem, so I'm probably gonna pick React. Now, you might say like, don't say we need to schedule a meeting with ops. Just say, why can't I do this myself? Don't say we need these, insert new buzz term. Say, what can we do today so that we can go faster? When you're focused on product development speed, you don't get caught up in jargon. You don't get caught up in fancy new tech. You're just really thinking constantly about how to keep it lean, keep it simple, and go faster. And in reflecting between being in a big company and a small company, now there are certain things I'll never say again. So I will never say the requirement should have been clearer. That is so unfair because it's so hard to know what it should be in the first place. Now, it doesn't mean there isn't some hard work that needs to be done by PMs. I'm not giving the leeway to not do good work. But emphasizing complete clarity in requirements is also actually saying we want to go really slow here because you're never going to have it be so clear. Instead, focus on how to make it possible to iterate and go faster. Of course, we should have used X. Like, for example, I mentioned you can use a message queuing with skip locked. And you do, and it puts too much load on your database. And someone says, of course we should have used SQS. It's so obvious we should have used SQS. Like, no, it wasn't obvious. Back then, you were trying to go fast. So stop exaggerating. Or saying, I don't know X, I'm a Y developer manager. It doesn't matter. If you don't know X, go learn X. You're here to solve the problem. We should use X, Google uses it. I think one thing you'll quickly realize, anything that big companies are using is usually a good sign to not use it. It's like you're thinking the wrong way. They're solving a really big scale problem, whereas a lot of the problems that people have increasingly can almost be solved with one machine. Like, it's very simple nowadays. So don't think about those problems. Think about the simplest way to solve it. And also update your heuristics, like new features. No, it's not months. It should be days. You shouldn't be thinking, I need more capacity in teams. You should be thinking individual people. That's all you need. Infrastructure shouldn't take days. It should take minutes. Have the updated set so that, you're not getting comfortable with, oh, it's just months. Oh, we're doing good. It's like, no, that's slow. It should be days. So hopefully, next steps, you can be curious. Do you know what are all the steps involved in your company's product development? You be bold, regularly question the rituals you have. Do they help? If they don't help, why are you doing them? Can you try something different? And be proactive. Network, come to these events, ask others, like, how do you solve this problem? What's a better way to do it? Those who are, especially in the startup space, they're all about trying to go fast. They're going to give you all the tricks and like, hey, just use this thing, it solves your problem, and move on. Like, network, come out of the echo chambers that companies can easily create to get a more perspective. I'm gonna pause. I think you had your hands up.
Actually, yes, but like I had a question related to previous slide. If you just move,
This
and
one? Which
no,
one?
no, no, like this one, new feature, like instead of months, days, like capacity about like instead of team you need right now, one person, infrastructure change instead of days, minutes. Like, what is impact of AI on all of this stuff in your mindset change? Because like, does AI change a lot? Because right now, like today, like this year, like for example, all AI stuff and all AI buzz, like it actually improve like speed of development, significantly improve speed of development from my experience. Like, what like what impact AI had on this slide?
I think so. AI definitely has an impact. Now, probably not as, in my opinion, it's not as catastrophic as people think, because a lot of the factors behind success and speed comes from the way you're approaching the problem and like the architectures you pick. And that's not something that you can really, like, I don't know how to prompt an AI to give me the most optimal architecture to solve a particular customer problem. I can ask an AI, please give me the bash script that does the following, and it will give me a pretty good starting point. Those parts, you definitely get a speed boost. So I do, and for sure, Copilot helps autocomplete much faster and simpler. But I think a lot of the productivity gains still comes from just simplification and people really having strong understanding on how to put pieces together. Now, on different parts of the business, for example, marketing material, there's definitely a productivity gain, like blog posting, visuals creation. There's so much that you can like you can just do quickly now. So adding like people, you should really scarcely need to add them because each person is far more productive. But every person, I think, from a software engineering is essentially getting compressed. All of us are almost being forced to be full stack because we are being forced to think about business problems more because we can rely on AI to do the coding, which is irrelevant. Coding is not problem solving. That will become AI's problem, but it won't take away our roles if you're always thinking about product problems.
It means like may I ask a question, like for example, like would you recommend like software engineers right now learn more about domain? Because not programming languages, because programming languages like might be replaced, like you can ask AI to write all of this stuff. But if they learn domain, if they understand customer problem, they will be significantly more successful.
Well, I think naturally, yes, because the first part is the more you know about domain, the more you're actually relevant from a CEO perspective. Like this, you can talk to the CEO. Like, whereas if you don't know a domain, like the CEO is trying to get rid of you because you don't actually understand the business. So you got to think about it from that perspective. It's already valuable, but also from a problem-solving space. If you don't know the domain, you don't understand where your constraints are going to come up, what your ilities are. Like you don't have a good intuition of how much scale you need for the problem space. So I think any strong developer or engineer is a person that actually really is good at understanding domain, communicating, and like focusing on the business problem. I haven't met a strong person that, for example, I would really love to bring into like a SkillSensei become successful into the company that was just technical. Like I just don't have a need. I don't see the value in it personally. Like it was something I contract out temporarily, but full-time employment, I don't understand the value proposition. I'm biased, but hopefully, I mean, again, this is a full stack group here, so maybe it resonates a few, but you can hopefully see the manual work is irrelevant.
But may I ask one more quick question in this direction? Do you think whole industry is going to change like that in the future?
I think a lot of winners are going to emerge that think like that. A lot of new companies that are starting, especially in this era where interest rates are low and everyone's trying to make sure everyone has very high value output, it's going to create a totally different dynamic. And I think, in my opinion, it's healthy because software engineers need to be thinking about business problems. So it's going to be a little uncomfortable if someone hasn't been doing that, but it will mean the new winners are going to be smaller, more domain focused, and leveraging AI wherever they can rather than trying to hire people. So naturally, I think it would.
Thank you so much.
I mean, just practically speaking, guys, like I'm like, even in terms of funding and whatnot, I just try to look at how to make myself go much faster, use AI wherever possible. Why would I spend money trying to hire people if I can just use an AI solution? So go OpenAI, give me that Sora video marketing capability. Yeah, I don't want to hire a video marketer. Oh, sorry, I meant interest rates are high. The opposite way. I want them to come down like the rest of us. So next steps, like I said, be curious, be bold, be proactive. And, if you're going to be in this industry for a while, then master your craft. I find sometimes like it's kind of an odd position where people are not really engaging themselves with their craft, with their profession, even though they're going to be doing it every single day for like 20, 30 years. It's like, well, if you're going to do it for that long, then let's take the moment to like really master your craft, be curious, see how the whole thing works. It really makes a big difference. I know for me, every time I've learned a new layer, obviously when you start, you can't learn everything at once. You're trying to just get some solid footing and then you broaden. But every time I've learned a new layer, I've just seen software development differently, and I've suddenly seen so many different problems be solved differently and simply. So hopefully, this emphasis on speed gets you to think about it differently, and you don't get caught up in buzz terms. And with that, that roughly sums it up. If you want to follow up with me, you can follow up there. And what I'm doing nowadays, I advise local software companies, which is exciting. I get perspective, but also if you're interested in the space of accelerating skill development, figuring out how to mentor quickly, creating roadmaps that allow people to learn, then, get in touch with me, because I'm trying to solve this problem, trying to make it simpler from personal experience. And hopefully I can do that by building something that makes it much simpler. And thank you all for your time here.
Thank you, Payam, but I guess we might have some questions. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, sure, of course. Why not?
But may I get just a little bit attention, because some people will drop after finishing presentation if you don't have question. Like, can I get just 1 minute, because Mike will show some slide.
Yeah, sure. I just have one slide. At the time, for the presentation, it was really great. Mine is just very simple, wrap up of the session. So yes, as we mentioned in the beginning, we have this amazing backhand challenge. So essentially, you can just go through this QR code and start with it. I also post the link to the actual challenge into the chat. But essentially, what you will find there is a very simple application that has some bugs in it. It actually has 3 bugs that you need to fix. And once you fix it, you will run it and you will see some code word. And what you need to do is just send us this code word to this email that is provided in the challenge. And first 3 winners will receive this valuable prizes from our friends from Wallaby and Quokka.js. Yeah, so just feel free to participate, and good luck and have fun.
Thank you, Mike, and we are ready to switch to questions.
Yep.
All right.
No,
yeah.
Will we stop sharing, Mike?
Yep, sure, I can stop.
Yeah, first, thanks a lot, Payam. That was great. I feel like being able to measure customer value and ROI as would be very crucial to leveling up, getting good at product development speed. Do you agree with that? And how do you think about being able to measure ROI and customer value, and how would you make that part of the software development lifecycle, so to speak?
I think in that pipe that I showed, measuring every part of it is not going to be easy and may not even be the best use of your time, because certain places are going to be judgment calls. But I think the part that is more important is to not get caught up in a subsegment of it. So for example, you ship to production, cool, you're not there yet. Don't suddenly ask for what's my next task? It's you didn't finish the job. Follow up. Do you have the analytics on it? Can you see anything? What happened with that feature? And that's an element that, it's a little bit of, asking the product members within a company, or if it's in a small startup, everyone being focused on, we did all the hard work. Did it work? And even in the startup position, I've already built certain features, man, did that work? I spent some time on that. I wish I didn't. So getting stuff out is actually really easy to get caught up in. It's really easy. You can actually solve for shipping quickly a lot more easily than solving for customer value. And when you start thinking about it, you start asking a lot more wait, do I really understand the problem? How can I even get in front of the customer? How can I get that? I would say you want to focus that way. Now, getting a metric on it, I think sometimes those are traps. You can spend a lot of time trying to engineer this part, which is still way more creative, and you're better off just get it out there and gas someone's input qualitatively. Oh, okay, we're on point. Let me just continue. That's how I would think about it. Now, different parts of it do try to measure, but I think people can get a good gut feel okay, this is getting slow. This is good enough. Let's move on. You can get a pretty good feel. Yeah. Cool. I mean, it's a small crowd, so if anyone has anything they want to ask, feel comfortable.
Hey, Payam. So one of the interesting challenges for me now that I've gone into the team lead role where I'm doing some technical work and some management work is trying to figure out how I can, encourage my team to think about speed and really prioritize it without, also leading down a path that might burn them out. How do we make speed engaging? How do we make speed rewarding? How do we make it feel like we care about the things that, we care about for the business, but also for the technical reasons as well. So a lot of developers are really in this game to do those refactorings that often don't have that same business case on the flip side.
Well, I think first part is sometimes we think like asking to go faster is going to lead to burnout. But honestly, put me in a slow environment and I'll have burnout. You're thinking it's about engagement. You won't be burnt out if you're engaged in your work, right? So it depends first how you position it. We're trying to go fast so we like our work. So we are feeling like we're getting more value out to people. It's not asking about, I want you to work more hours. It's trying to say, I want us to use the hours more efficiently, is what we're trying to do and make it more fun. The second part I've noticed is people will burn out when they are set up, to fail. Like they don't have the skills and you're asking them to do it. Like this is the part that frustrates me. Goal setting is different than skill mastery, but it's so easy for organizations to say, if you only get the right OKR, only the right SMART goals, like that's how you do it. It's like the person can't do the job. They will burn out. They will be stressed out. It's not possible. So let's do what we can change. Are they skilled? Do they have the competency? Do they understand what they need to do? That can actually provide you a lot more value and give a lot more promise for the individual. Now, obviously, you want a bit of both. If you don't have goals, you don't know where you're going. But it's like, someone who's never ran a marathon and you say, okay, your goal for the year is to win the marathon. It's like, okay, it's like very unlikely and also very difficult. It's even unknown. Even someone who trains for the marathon may not win the marathon, right? But you can increase the probability of them succeeding by focusing on the skills. Do they have the skills? Do they understand how to do things? Now, all those aspects can really reduce the burnout factor. Then, engaging the team, I do think it's a cultural element. It will be harder, like if everyone has gotten used to a certain rhythm. If you put a high-performing person into, and this is my opinion, you put a high-performing person into an average environment, everyone will be very quick to say, well, I can't be like so-and-so, like they're so different. And so everyone just continues as is. Now, put a low-performing person in an average environment, and then you'll hear like, oh, why aren't you so tough with them? Like they're going fine. Like, why are you so picky with me? So it's really hard to push people up. It's really easy for them to fall down. So you want to protect both ways. Inspire for people to go higher, but also prevent like the thing that pulls people down. That's an important part of a team lead. Whenever you're giving candid feedback to individuals, don't think that you're giving candid feedback. Like it's not about sometimes the individual. You're thinking about you're helping the team. The team is getting frustrated and burnt out because they're putting up with someone that is not carrying weight. Like that's the ways to think about it. And once you do that more and more over time, I think you'll realize everyone's appreciating it, everyone's getting more engaged, and you're getting the outcomes that you wanted. That's my personal opinion. Okay. Oh, Keith asked something in the chat. Given that you're highly discerning about adding additional tech, what approach do you take now when evaluating tech for when and what to add into the mix? So it's an interesting question. I think, first it's a little bit of how you see yourself. It's easy to like tech, but over time, and again, if you focus on product development speed, it starts to become the opposite. It's like, oh, more stuff? Like that's more stuff. I don't want more stuff. I want to solve the problem. I tend to add whenever I can understand how it will really genuinely help me become simpler and go faster. So I'm always looking on how to add tech to make it simpler if possible. Like I don't know what's a good example. Like if I can add a tool that helps me keep consistent typing between my database, backend, front end, it's a good addition because it improves my product development speed. So I tend to think a lot about what's going to help us go faster, but not make things so complicated that it's just now hard to manage the platform. But over time, I've just come to not like adding a whole lot tech anymore. I've become more and more basic as life has gone on. But I don't know, my opinion.
Question. Infrastructure as a code. What is the simplest tool?
You know, it's if you want the proper answer, is to say it's for me to ask, who are we talking about using it? Like,
What
if
you would
someone
recommend?
hasn't coded and I tell them CDK, I'm just gonna hear them come back and complain about how hard it is and how much better Terraform is. But if it's a developer's asking me, I'll tell them go use CDK. I'm like, oh wow, I never knew infrastructure could be so simple.
But what you would recommend for me?
I would say all it's a bit of a biased thing, but even when I created the DevOps team within the originally worded company, ACL, I started with the theory and philosophy that all things will move more towards development than vice versa, because we are like the development way of thinking about it, the developer way of thinking about it is going to be more scalable and easier to understand. So the tooling set I would recommend is more developing oriented. So I'm still on the CDK camp, even though CloudFormation is awfully slow and sometimes I absolutely hate using it. But it still means less code, which means less stuff I have to know, less language complexities. It's still, and that is the bigger driving force. Now, when some new evolution comes by, I would switch over. But for now, I still think that's probably the simplest. Now, if you're on Azure and other things, then I think you have to use Terraform, but on the AWS.
Actually, Azure has Bicep. It's very similar to CDK.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, see, I think all roads are going to move into that development path because it's one way of thinking about it. Like, it's just simpler, in my opinion. Cool. Did you say it's now socializing time? Or... Oh, wait, there you go. Abdul.
Hey, Payam, thanks for the presentation. Quick question. So you mentioned that for a product development speed to actually work right, it has to be end-to-end, so from idea to customer value. How do you validate an idea and do it quickly without sacrificing quality, if you will, and the kind of features you decide to actually work on? Because it might be easy to just want to go fast and just get the first few ideas that you get from your target audience and decide to go with that, just to go fast. So how to make sure, how do you make sure to work on the right ideas, but also not lose time?
If it's $1 million question in some regards, but I think the part that I would, in my experience, it would be to say the emphasis on product development speed just makes you think about what's really important to go fast, right? So even though I'm a startup, there are certain parts that I've written a lot of tests for. So anything security and permission, there are a lot of different tests for it, because that's an area that if it goes wrong, it's very catastrophic. But if there are certain areas I'm like, if this goes bad, someone gets a 500 error, no problem. Like, I'll deal with it. So it becomes more about trade-off and rather than it being dogmatic. So you're thinking about what are the key pieces we got to get right that will not give a bad experience to the user, and what are the areas that we can maybe hold off until we validate the solution. Because the biggest waste is if you build something that no one even wanted, right? And you build it perfectly. So you're trying to do this balancing act. Now, the gauging point is, as you talk with different people, you realize thematically certain problems are coming up. And then you just have to, at some point, as the Basecamp podcast leaders would say, it's a judgment call. Like, you can't, there's no data source that's going to make the call for you. At some point, you say, this is sufficient. We're going to go for a gut feel. And you just give it a shot. But you can at least try to get rid of all the fat along the way and know what's really important to not get wrong. Like, sometimes people forget, like, testing and QA is actually about risk reduction. It's not like you always do X under X, Y condition. It's like, well, what's the risk you have and how can you reduce it? And quality is like an element of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? should we stop recording and we might get more questions?